Okay, good evening. This is a regular scheduled meeting of Business and Economic Development Committee for Monday, September 18th. It is now 6:25. We have committee members Davitt, Schaefer, Trumbull, Yakubaga, and myself. And we have Director of our Development, Ann Krieg. And Councilor Leonard will be back in a couple minutes. So Ann, first agenda item is a report on the Community Development Block Grant Spending Project.
Yeah, our Community Development Officer, Robin Stenicky, is here to present sort of an update on CDBG. Councilors may recall, as part of your ARPA reviews, there's been some things that have been sent over to the block grant program. So we've been keeping Robin very busy, trying to get through all of that. So, go ahead.
Yes, so councilors may recall that we were looking at the next 4 quarters of the budget for CDBG to meet a timeliness requirement in expenditures of our award. And this required us to actually amp up some of our funding requests, get more money out the door. And I wanted to just update this council to let you know that we will meet those benchmarks by the first quarter rather than the third. So you may recall we've made some really impactful awards in housing. And as part of that, we're able to get more money out the door. So, yeah. I think I also had another part of that as part of the update. We are completing our fiscal year 2022 reporting on the expenses that we have, projects that we've put forward, and some really notable accomplishments again in housing, trying to get those community needs prioritized. So please feel free, and if you can, go onto our website on the CDBG page and just look that over. And if you have any comment, please get in touch with me. We'd appreciate that.
Councilor Davitt.
Thank you. Just a thank you. I appreciate this. And especially it's been really good to be able to balance our ARPA requests and send this. Although I do appreciate Debbie's face now sometimes when we're like, couldn't it be CDBG? She's like, well, you've spent some money. It's not never ending. But just looking at the accomplishments piece in terms of the housing and just everything that you were able to do with it. It's great. And we're glad we have you on board.
Thank you very much. Yes.
Yeah, it was hard to see all of the money like staying there, and we don't know what to do with the money. We want to use it in a good way, and then all of these options, I feel it's the best way of investing this amount of money. It's a lot of money, and when you talk about housing, the need for housing, affordable housing, and even the other program, if you can remind me of the name of the program. When we wanted to address the housing crisis, can you remind me? The landlord liaison, yes.
Oh, yeah.
So I mean, like so many areas that this money was really directed to be spent. I think it's huge. So I want to thank you guys. And it's thinking differently. I think that's what it took to get this money into the right place.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Perfect. Yeah, and the ARPA process really got you in the mind frame of saying, here's where big numbers can, make some big impact. So
Sure.
we definitely want to see that, going forward.
Yeah.
Make a comment. I don't think we have the exact dollar figures, but a lot of one that went out through the block grant program. We provided funding to Penquist for Milford Street, Volunteers of America for property acquisition, Bangor Area Homeless Shelter for acquisition of property on Hammond Street, which was going to then be leased to Fresh Start Sober Living. We provided some funding for Design Wall Housing for their property. We provided some additional funding to Penquist for the Pine Tree Inn project. And some money for community housing in Maine for property on Hollow Street.
Mhm.
So those are a lot of projects, some of which were within the original ARPA requests.
Right.
That we were able to handle by juggling the funds around. So that's I think a very substantial amount of funding, because we had almost $1 million left over and.
Oh, right.
And then another
Yep.
800,000 in this year's budget or something like that.
Yeah, we actually spent $872,000 on just housing projects in fiscal year 22 to 23. So
That's awesome.
some really great.
So it's a great story to tell, along with what we've done with ARPA, to make sure we don't separate these things out and say, well, because it's really a package of housing initiatives that we funded in two different ways. So I'm pleased to see that we've been able to use the funds in those ways.
Absolutely.
Any other comments or questions? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Ruben.
Second agenda item is the housing discussion.
Yes, I think it was a couple of meetings ago, Counselor Sprague had given a draft action plan for addressing Bangor's housing needs. And what we did was we took that and we created two draft documents, one sort of as almost like an FAQ of all of the things that the city has done to address the housing crisis. And then sort of like what we did with the affordable housing recommendations from 2019. We might recall we had a table of all of those recommendations and where those were at, which ones had we implemented. And we did something similar for that, so that in-house and sort of at staff level, we can use that to continue to track our progress and sort of assign projects.
Okay. Comments, questions? Well, I think it's really moves us along to having something that we could hand somebody and say, hey, here's the plan for what we anticipate doing during the next several months. It wasn't, and maybe I missed it, but it wasn't clear on these forms here, the spreadsheet forms, what the timeline was for all of this.
Yeah, this is just an early draft. We just sort of wanted to get all of the things down on paper of what you had provided us. And and then at a staff level, we'll with staff capacity as to start assigning things. Yeah.
Okay, so that's a good update in terms of framing these up in a way that we could look and say, this is what we're going to be able to do. And then we attach some timelines to them.
Right.
And we'll really be able to say, okay, what are we going to do during the next 3, 6, 12 months? And then I believe it can be useful when the council gets into the budgeting process next year. We ought to be able to pull something like this out and when it's up to date and
Right.
say, how do budget decisions affect our ability to implement the plan that the council authorized? So I think that's, we're making some progress.
Councilor
I mean, again, as we talked about in our previous meeting, the committee meeting, that the draft that Councillor Sprague presented, I looked at it as a framework to keep the conversation going or to start the conversation. And I feel like this is the work that staff has put based on that draft. I mean, that's exactly what was missing. It's to have the plan, numbers, and that's where, when we talk about conversation started. So.
Thank you. I think it will be important to, at some point to, when the draft is completed and the dates are attached, to be able to bring it back to the committee and then to the council, so the council can say, yes, this is what we want to adopt, and whether that's done in a workshop or voted on at a council meeting. And I'm thinking this might have to go and get comments from the planning board, maybe, or do you think that will be necessary?
I mean, if it's zoning projects, we always keep them apprised early in the process of zoning projects that we're working on. So it kind of depends on the action, of whether or not it needs planning board response.
Okay, Council Davenant.
Actually, along those lines, is it something that, the racial equity human advisory that would
Yep.
go to for them?
Yep, this, yeah, city manager.
I was just like,
Yeah, we've been asked to come next week, to talk about our different projects, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's important that we have input from them as well. But this will, I think we're looking for a flexible framework that supports the council's discussions, and I think this moves us in that direction. So thank you for that.
Yeah.
Any other? We're gonna talk about this as well.
Yeah, that was the sort of that FAQ like document that will continue, we'll keep that updated. We put that on the website just so people can see and counselors can easily download.
And I would just say that if there's any particular pieces of information missing,
Yeah,
or things that you think would be relevant and good to share, kind of let us know. Because we'll have, our staff, our social media staff kind of work on making it. Ann and I aren't the ones that make it pretty.
But I think this should be very helpful, because not only for city staff, but for any counselor who wants to address for constituents what the city is really doing with respect to housing, and being able to have on a page a quick summary of what some of those major initiatives are. And as we build the plan out, this will build out to 1 to 3 months into a longer period of time, so that we can be saying this is what we're going to be doing during the next 12 to 18 months. But this is very helpful, and I think that I don't want to lose this little box up here in the corner, which may be not so prominent, but the fact that we've got 392 units of housing that have been approved but not yet constructed, and an additional 84 in the 22-23 period. I mean, that's almost 500 housing units. And that's, I think, very significant that there's that much work or housing in progress to meet what we say is a tremendous need in the community. 500 additional units of housing is a lot of housing. Council Davenant, think how appreciate.
I was just gonna ask, does that includes things like the Milford, like PCHG's or Penquist's projects?
It
and
does.
all of those?
Right.
Okay.
It does.
that don't have an occupancy permit, or,
Right,
Yeah.
but those aren't just standalone, like people.
oh, yeah,
Building,
that
that's the whole-
includes
yeah.
multifamily, yeah.
My question is related to that. Does it include projects that are under legal
Yes,
challenge?
yes.
So both important points.
Yes.
And, I'm happy to be able to tell people if they say, what's Bangor doing? To be able to say, we've got 500 units of housing that have either been done in the last year or are approved but not yet constructed. And other ideas that are in the works that people haven't gotten approved yet. So I think we've heard about several other developments that are in discussion. So you take 500 and you add a couple hundred more to it, and that's a lot of housing for a relatively short period of time. So I think we should be pleased. I'm pleased with that. Any other comments, questions? Okay.
Thank you. Thank you. So next on the agenda is short-term regulations. Anya, do you want to come up and, Anya's done some more work to get some more background information that the committee had asked for.
So based on our previous discussions, it seemed like the main questions were other towns that had done caps, how they did those. And then also how they issued their licenses. Did they use a lottery? Was it first come, first served? And then also a grace period for those existing short-term rentals versus sunset clause that our attorney had mentioned. So I looked at 4 different towns and they kind of had, just slightly different methods of doing their cap. Portland, just caps non-owner occupied, which we would call non-hosted short-term rentals. They used the number that they had at the time of ordinance adoption, and they added a little bit of space for growth. And that number is 400. It's been 400 for, I think, a few years now. They do consistently meet that. They have a waiting list, and their licenses are first come, first serve. All of the towns I looked at were first come, first serve. And then all of them did use a grace period of sorts. Portland's was a little shorter. They just used 30 days. Kittery capped all of their short-term rentals, hosted and non-hosted. They used the number at the time of adoption similar to Portland, and they added 8% for growth. Kennebunkport also capped all short-term rentals, and they did the ratio of existing short-term rentals to their total number of dwelling units. So it was a little more complicated. And then they establish a new cap every year. And then in Bar Harbor, they cap only non-hosted, and they used just the number of dwelling units. They used 9% of the number of dwelling units. Similar to Portland, they meet that cap every year as well. And so that was the gist of the caps. And then I did also hear from one consultant in New Hampshire about grace periods. It seems to be the general practice is to do that. We did include draft language in your packets. We do a 6-month grace period. That's what we propose. And then it also has draft in there for proposing a lottery system for issuing licenses. That was just putting that out there. We have alternative language for if you want to do first come, first serve. And then just putting some numbers out there. When I kind of dug deep into our short-term rental data and kind of pulled out some previous numbers we had given, it was just a glance at the dashboard. That did include some like motels and hotels, so I tossed those out. And so these numbers are really based on what we would be looking at. 129 total, and then 52 were non-hosted, 28 hosted, and 49 unknown. So I think we would really want to look at the unknowns plus the known non-hosted to come up with a cap. And I just threw out some numbers for if we used a cap based on the current number of rentals versus current number of dwelling units. And they kind of vary significantly. So just putting that out there for direction. I do want to point out that the total number, the 129 short-term rentals I had listed, that was based on a rental period of 28 days. And after speaking with code, we thought it might be best to go to 30 just to be consistent with some of the building codes. And so that would put that number a little bit higher. You know, it wouldn't be a huge difference, but just want to put that out there.
Councilor Davenport?
Thank you for this. My feedback would be capping only non-hosted, 6 months grace period. I guess I would lean towards the first come, first serve, as far as getting them and then keeping a wait list, I guess, and to have them not be transferable when the property is sold. As far as how we what do we base it on? I guess I'd be curious of what staff, if you guys have a particular recommendation between number of dwelling units versus like combining the non-hosted with the unknowns. Kind of, I don't know, I wouldn't want to say like a wash in either direction, but like if there's, and then also what if the growth rate piece for each, what the idea of what increasing would be by.
Yeah,
What do you think?
I know. I mean, it seems like 5% might be a good growth rate. Yeah. I mean, starting at
What do
what,
you start with? Do you
with
start
what we
start
have.
at 3 something? I can't remember, you threw a number out last time, but it was just a total, you didn't have a breakdown.
Right,
Hosted, non-hosted. didn't you?
right. I was able to break it down. 52 are non-hosted, 28 hosted, and 49 are unknown.
So we'd be looking at roughly 100, maybe a little more.
Right,
Yeah.
So what are we gonna do about the unknown ones?
I would suggest lumping that with the non-hosted, because they
Okay.
could all be non-hosted. Just
Okay.
don't know that.
Yeah,
Oh,
I think that's a safer bet.
uh,
If you're trying to keep things sort of where they are now, that's
Mhm.
probably a good way to go.
mm.
Councilor Schaefer?
My question is I'm still unclear on what the grace period is that you have 30 days to get a license?
That would be, you have 30 days to come into compliance with the ordinance, which would include getting a license.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, and then if it's lottery, you may or may not get that? Or would it
Right,
be?
and so that gives them that time, that 6 months, because a lot of people book well in advance.
But, well, that's my other
And so it
thought.
allows them to start not renting or pursue.
And then my thought about lottery is like, could I join the lottery just to take a permit so that nobody can have it and take away? So
That's a problem in Bar Harbor.
like, because I mean, I will never, I don't have room for my own family in my house, so I would never offer a bed up to a stranger. I mean, but like, I could see somebody like, fine, I'll get the lottery, I'll pay, here you go. Now I have a permit and you can't have one because even though you have you live in a duplex and wanted to do that with the other half of your house. So that's kind of why, I don't know. And is there any sort of, if you're gonna license a short-term rental, are you gonna come to my house and be like, this could never be a short-term rental?
Well, that's the thing with the license, you'd be subjecting yourself to an inspection for life safety, so.
Yeah.
Which, might need some investments into the property and,
So that's just one of, I don't want to say concerns, but one of my thoughts. I like the idea, I think I like the idea of the 1% of dwelling units. If we have 400 coming on, then that's 4 more that would be involved in the growth of the city. I would like to be able to say 99% of our housing is not short-term rentals. That's the other reason why I like that 1%, just because we've seen a lot of cities where I don't know the percent, but it feels like a definite impact in a lot of regions.
yeah,
So that would be my other thought, but I like the 1%. Maybe it inspires more people to build and add units to have another one. And also a hosted would be, if I live in a duplex, is that considered a
Right.
hosted rental? Or if I have a house
you
and I
live on the premise.
put a cabin in the backyard for an ADU, that
Mhm.
would be considered hosted because I live there.
Yep.
But I couldn't rent both of them.
Yeah, because what we heard from our meetings with the public was people that are located, that are renting, that are located on the property. A lot of the background, the feedback that we received was that is in keeping with, people trying to, have extra income from their home and there's less issues there because the owner lives there.
Yeah, and the owner is part of the neighborhood, and so the
Right,
owner, I mean, when I first moved to Bangor, I only looked for owner occupied apartment buildings because I figured if the roof is gonna leak into my apartment, it's gonna eventually end up in theirs, and so they'll be more quick to take care of it.
right.
So I like that idea. But I like the 1%, and I think I like the first come, first serve, so that it would allow people who are maybe listening to this conversation. I also like the idea of not having 30-day rentals be part of that, because I think there is a place for a 30-day rental. I'm here for a fellowship, I'm here for a
Mhm.
travel nursing job. That's,
Yeah.
there's still definitely a need for short-term rentals that aren't the residents in or whatever. So I'm fine with not having those be part of this.
Just to clarify, one of the things you raised, are you leaning one way or the other in terms of saying if somebody does get a permit, there should be a time period in which they should have to implement the short-term rental or forfeit the permit?
I honestly, I haven't given that much thought. This is just all sort of coming into my head right
It was a
here.
good thought,
But
but so maybe that's something and you could think about in terms of so that we don't have a big lottery and all the permits go to people who just say, thanks for the permit, but I
Yeah.
have no plan to implement, or to give them a certain period of time that they have to implement or get licensed to follow up on receiving the permit. I think that's worthy of some additional consideration. And
it sort of falls along the line of our discussion about vacant buildings. If you're just gonna sit on the empty building and not have it be turned into
Yeah.
housing, is it another thing to sit on a permit and not have it be used for
I
something?
think that would be consistent. Another point you raised, which I think we brought up in the previous discussion, is there any differentiation between workforce housing and non-workforce housing? Or is there any way we would want to grant permits based on documented need? Because if we have a real workforce problem and we have a real shortage of workforce housing, then maybe we might want to promote more non-hosted units to meet that need. I don't know.
I don't know that yet. I mean, I feel like workforce housing is covered between a 30-day rental or a residence in if your company's paying for it. Like, I feel like that's covered. And I think if you get too, I would think that if you get too murky about what you're doing with the apartment building you own, it's gonna get too messy. Whereas it's either you have a permit to do rentals less than 30 days, or you have 30 days or more, or whatever that,
Yeah,
30, not, I know you said 28 and 30, now I'm
Yeah,
getting myself
sorry.
confused. So I wouldn't want to get, because workforce development could mean any, workforce housing could mean anything. So I wouldn't want to get
yeah.
too in the
bogged
weeds
down
that
in
way.
that. And we'll do an evaluation at the end of the year to council, just to say, these are the number of permits we issued, and,
Mhm.
you know, these are the number of complaints we got, or, you know, just kind of go through it all with you at the end of the year, so that you can see how it worked.
But I think coming to that point, I mean, the annual review, but
Mhm,
you're also going to be doing a housing production study to
mhm,
look at the number of units Bangor really needs of which type of housing.
right,
And it may be that flowing out of that study, it would fine tune the percentage that would be most applicable for short-term
right,
housing. So you may want to come back to us and say, based on the study we did, this is a revised recommendation for that.
mhm,
And I kind of like the idea of saying, okay, take a fresh, well, review progress or the status on an annual basis and make adjustments as necessary.
I had another question. There are clearly several long-term or short-term rentals that are all owned by the same company or managed by the same company, but I think they're owned, when you look at Parcel of Yours is my favorite. So is that company able to go in and buy all 100 permits and say, this is it?
No, there's another cap for, it would be 5 per person or entity.
Okay.
So, and that does, the wording of the person or entity addresses, you know, it's all under the same financial management. It tries to get at the whole LLC problem.
Yeah.
And then in addition to that, there's also a cap per building as well. So there's really.
And would the Phoenix Inn, which is being all done by Airbnb, would that be 20 permits for that building, or is that a separate situation?
They would fall under a hotel because they have to get a lodging license with the way that they're set up.
Okay.
They would fall under a hotel.
All right.
Yeah. And to get at just a thought that occurred on your concern about somebody like tying up a license and holding on to it. I think the lottery might actually address that, because they would have to reapply every year and chance not getting that license, whereas first come, first serve, it's more likely somebody could do that. They could get one, hold on to it. So.
Councilor Yakabaga, you have.
Yeah, just a point about lottery. I think it was not, my concern is what was discussed in the previous meeting, that it was not recommended compared to first come, first serve. I think it was like it said, it's gonna be subjected to the court
lottery.
scrutiny, and
right. The lottery is being tested.
yeah.
in court.
So I don't know how that would affect the process if we decide to go with lottery versus first come, first serve. So maybe that's something to, revisit, I feel, based on our conversation and the lawyer who was present. And
Yeah, the consideration of which one would expose us to the least legal
lottery,
Right.
yes.
issues.
Mhm.
Like, clarify
To
that.
avoid, yes, that's what, yeah.
Councilor Trumbull?
Yeah, thought I wasn't confused, now I'm confusing it. So if I live out of town, and I have a property in town, I'm using it as short-term rental. I have to apply every year for the license? Okay, so, we don't have to have it that way. Can't you get the license and keep it?
It's up to
Because
you.
yeah,
You could do
It
it
would
that
seem to
way.
me, what's the, I mean, if this grows and somebody's made investment in property based on that's their financial model, is that's how it's gonna work for them by renting it out. I would definitely not support this if it has to be renewed every year. And I think I would support it if it's a license that they can keep with the property. And if we set up enough licenses to cover everybody that has one now, plus a few more, because, I mean, you say, okay, you're gonna give somebody 6 months, well, they might not, and you can't, I mean, I think it was made clear in that discussion we had that you cannot guarantee somebody that has one now that they will get a license, even if it's first come, first served, they still have to go through the process, so if it's 100 non-hosted, I could see, 130, and you give somebody, you give that time period, but if you have to renew every year, that's I wouldn't do one at all in Bangor if we have to renew it. Yeah, it's like, what's the
So
point?
then it becomes sort of first come, first serve, year one, and that's it.
Right. But there's gonna be growth in there. No, not you.
Right.
Everybody's talked about growth in the formula as well.
Part of I think the reasoning for licensing every year was to make sure they still meet, like, for example, inspection standards. They would be inspected.
Right, they
every
have to be
3 years.
renewal, but once you get it, I think,
I think what
Oh,
Counselor Trumbull is
I
saying
see
is
where
that
he's
the
going.
first time you do it, you do a first come, first serve.
Right.
And then in year two, if you're an existing license
Right.
holder, you can come
automatically
in
renew.
and
right, you gotta
reapply.
be.
And as long as you still meet all of the criteria to
Because you
be
make
eligible,
investments in the property,
you
make it a rental property,
your license would.
You don't
be
get the
renewed.
return in 1 year.
Okay, I see what you're
I
saying.
would be okay with that, not having it set to 0 every year.
Yeah.
Like, I think that
Okay,
I have it, and I'm gonna come in, and I was one of the first people to get one, so that,
that's what we were doing.
Right, that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I think that's a very appropriate to, just to have people have to renew,
Yeah.
but not to lose their license if they
Exactly.
choose.
Not gonna-
One year you could have it, the next year you
Right.
could.
And then that leaves a process where if they choose not to renew, then you know about it, and then you
and then
can
it opens it up.
put it back in the water.
It is like you would renew it.
Oh, it
wouldn't be
is.
a new one.
Okay, that's why you set up.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the lottery system, though, they wouldn't be guaranteed, but first come, first served, definitely, and it's already written in there that.
I think that's the way we want to go. with.
Okay, good.
Okay.
yeah,
Sounds okay.
is there and I'm sorry that I haven't read all the details. So Dan sets up his rental. He lives in Brunswick. Someone comes in every week, but he always seems to have the worst tenants who are always having the worst parties and it's tearing up the neighborhood. Can we take away his license if there's multiple police calls or if there's multiple code, like we have the ability to
Yep, there's
de-license?
language in there about disruptive property,
Okay.
so that could happen.
But you gotta be careful about
Yeah.
when it comes to Brunswick. Yeah.
Almost the ones.
Counselor Davitt?
Thank you. And just, and I concur with the, what we're talking about in terms of the renewal versus starting over. But with that, and I wanted to make sure I understood Councilor Trumbull, like say that property was then sold, would you want the license to go along with that?
No,
Okay, no, so make sure.
Well, but whatever. Yeah.
Okay, so that's a lot of good comments. Any other comments or questions? Anything else you need?
Sorry, I guess I'm just still not clear on whether we wanted to establish the cap on percentage of dwelling units versus number of rentals we have right now.
I'm down with dwelling units.
Yeah. Well, what if we had figured out what a good cap to start with is and figure what percentage that is of current dwelling units and the tie that use that percentage going forward.
I think that's what the 1%.
Yeah.
The
Well, how
1%.
many is 1% right now?
The 1%.
It's like 153, right?
Oh, okay.
Yeah, because right now there's a one over 100, but not 153 already has. a higher
Yeah, so
number.
153 is 1% of our housing units.
Yeah.
I know, yeah, that's fine.
And then when there's 400
Right.
more next year, it can go up to 157. I like, and I really like the conciseness of saying 99% of our housing is in the general market, 1% is short-term rentals. I like, yeah. I like
And once we have the registry in place, we'll be so much clearer.
That's right.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Okay,
That's
anything else?
next. That's coming next.
Enough?
I'm good. Thank
Great.
you.
Thank you, Anya.
Thank you.
Before you close the meeting, I want to introduce our new Economic Development Officer, Stephanie McLagan.
Good evening, everyone.
Hello.
Welcome.
Stephanie worked at Maine Connectivity Authority before coming here, and before that was with the island, you see, I steal it. That was done on purpose, I tell you, and the Island Institute. So we're thrilled Stephanie's here, and yeah,
Welcome.
she's hitting the ground running this week, so we're starting to pile up, not too much, but
So everybody send your requests. Stephanie, welcome her with a long list of news.
Asks, yeah.
Awesome.
Great,
great.
welcome.
Oh, I do have one more. That's right. I'm sorry. I jumped to the next, I jumped to the end of the agenda. There is one more agenda item. Yeah.
Oh, parking. Yeah.
Yeah, the Parking Advisory Committee, the way it's worded right now, they have to go to the full city council, you know, in order to get something thrown back to parking committee, and that just seems kind of cumbersome and unnecessary. So we're offering the language that it's a city council committee. It's likely going to be this committee, but we just kind of kept it generic with city council committee.
Or infrastructure. Need a motion?
Yeah,
Move
be
that
great.
recommendation.
Second.
Like it's quick.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
No, that makes a lot
Hearing
of
none,
sense.
we'll move forward with it.
All right, thank
Thank
you. Thank
What did
you.
we do 2 weeks ago when David since we passed for them?
You have to say the magic word.
We just want to.
We already moved it.
We're adjourned.
Oh, sorry.